onward we go, just in the interest of time here. At the bottom of page 97, there's a wonderful couple of little articles that I use with my students about the 10 worst teaching mistakes. It's sort of a top 10 list going from 10 to 1, the way that these things go. I'll just let you look at all of that. There's all kinds of ways that there are bad teaching mistakes. We all have our particular pet peeves. But what's interesting for them is the number one thing: disrespecting students. I thought that was very, very interesting. That's the number one cardinal sin. Back to what I was saying about the teacher-student relationship and creating conditions of trust in a learning community, and actually Augustine in the Christian tradition talking about love. Makes a lot of sense, actually. So totally secular stuff. Just reviewing all of the literature that's out there. Cardinal sin number one: disrespect. If we are made in the image of likeness of God with intrinsic worth, with inherent dignity, all of us together as human beings, it makes sense that that's the answer. Over the page, page 98. This is an interesting one, and it's another thing you might have heard of. This is a famous diagram, famous concept. A guy named Dale, Professor Dale, invented this, the cone of experience. And it's been debated, as all this stuff is and does. Various people have contested pieces of this. But it holds a certain kind of intuitive value for us to think about. So how does the chart go? People remember 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, 30% of what they see, 50% of what they see and hear, 70% of what they say and write, 90% of what they do. So in the gray, well, it's green. It should be green since it's gray for some of you, right? You've got differing kinds of learning activities, right, that people are doing. That's the way this is set up, right? Just to illustrate, what would that mean? And then along the right, they've got certain kinds of outcomes. It's actually a very useful little thing, right? Because if your outcomes are, again, at a more superficial level, certain kinds of methods are going to be better. The deeper you go, in terms of analyzing, creating, evaluating, right, it's going to call for more means of engagement. Interesting, okay? And I think it's sort of intuitive, because the way that so many of us would say we learn the most is what? By teaching it to somebody. Isn't that how you've learned the most about virtually everything? Yeah. Well, Professor Dale would say, yeah, exactly, that's my point. Look at what happens down at the 90%. You're designing, performing a presentation. You're doing the real thing, whatever the real thing is, right? It's engaged, it's active, it's hands and feet, it's demonstrable, it's accountable, it's usually public. So that's what you're doing with the stuff. That's application, right? That's where you really learn. So there's a program, a new program we're designing at Regent around leadership, theology, and society. And the capstone experience at the end of the day is going to be students teaching other people what they've learned in the program. So they do capstone experience of their own to pull together all the elements of the program the way many master's degrees do. The element that we're putting into play is, oh, and then also beyond that, they're going to teach it to other people. Why? I'm the one that's insisting on that. Because people are going to learn more about what they've learned if they begin to be accountable for it in the way of sharing it and teaching it to somebody else. It's going to help refine, prioritize, clarify, and give them the task of now teach this to somebody else. Right? Equipping and education for me is about helping people transfer that knowledge and then share it with other people. Take it and go and do something with it. You know, go and do likewise. Right? So that's part of the goal that we have, is somebody will have an ability to take what they've got and use it in a new setting and share it and teach it to somebody else. Well, you've got a structure for that. If that's a goal, you have to give people an opportunity to do that. train with that end in mind, give people an opportunity to do it, give them feedback about how that went, right? So you learn an awful lot. So it makes sense. Just an illustration of how this sort of cone works. But it naturally means then that what you need is a layering and a complementing of different kinds of methods. Right? So just hearing something as opposed to hearing and seeing, right? The hands-on becoming really important, the practical, the applied. Right? This is where the oral and the visual comes together with the read-write, comes back with the kinesthetic, back to our VARC categories. The more of those are engaged, actually, overall the better. The kinesthetic, not in the sense that our dancer is, but in the sense of experiment, hands-on, applied. Right? Do something with it. Take it outside the four walls, not necessarily do a dance to it, but apply it into a new setting. Right? All that, I think, carries great value for us. A whole chunk of these notes now here, there's a bit here on a fairly prominent idea, the banking model of education. We've really dealt with that. That was the essentially the opening up of Lanny's head and just pouring a bunch of stuff in there. That's really what that's all about.